Most of us, I believe, are uncomfortable with the harsh tone and the divisive spirit of public debate and increasingly private conversation. We're going to talk about that today on Family Life's Inside Out, where we look at how God transforms his people from the inside out. I'm Martha Manikas Foster, and my guest today is author and speaker Alexandra Hudson, founder of Civic Renaissance. She's the author of the 2023 book, The Soul of Civility. Her recent Christianity Today article is titled, It's Time for a New Era of Christian Civility. Welcome, Alexandra, and your baby to Inside Out.
Martha, a privilege to be with you. Thanks for having us, both of us.
I'm excited about hearing the little cooing sounds in the background. So Alexandra, just as a baseline, how would you characterize the way we relate to each other in 2025? And if Christian civility would help improve things, could you break that down for us? What is Christian civility? What makes it Christian?
Civility is grounded in human dignity, the bare minimum of respect that we're owed and owe to others by virtue of the shared imprint of the divine we each have as human beings. Genesis 1:27 says, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. We each have an irreducible moral worth by virtue of our common humanity and our shared dignity. It's not just about manners and politeness and niceness and knowing which forks to use. It's about personhood. And that is, I think, the crisis that we face today. It's a crisis of failing to see people as they really are, a crisis of dehumanization.
Yes. So people are worthy of respect simply by being. Is that fair?
That's exactly correct. That is exact. And we are too.
Yes.
It's not, civility is a mutual, reciprocal duty. It's not just what we owe others, it's what we are owed. And sometimes that means standing up for ourselves.
Yes.
And saying, I deserve better, or calling someone out, saying, that was not an appropriate way for you to speak to me or treat me.
It sounds a lot like the hard work of intentional peacemaking. So saying that I hear you, but there's a line here. But
that's right. Yeah. Or that's exactly correct. Or as, Tim Keller and other thoughtful theologians and preachers and thinkers have shared it as like speaking the truth in love. If we're all love without truth, we coddle people in their sin and their shortcomings. If we're all truth without love, we're just coming out swinging, preaching hard truths all the time. That's a recipe for callousing people's hearts and minds towards the truth that we might have for them. So it's about that balance of speaking the truth in love and doing one without the other. It incapacitates us from being effective and actually respecting and loving others.
Very good. Because I think that we say as Christians, we speak the truth in love, and we can go one way or the other on that whole spectrum. Yes, I agree.
Or in churches, for example, or even in personal relationships, in our communities or at the individual level, we can think that the loving thing to do is to sweep something under the rug. That can be hurtful to us. Of course, there's a time and a place to do that. But that can be hurtful to us to not have reconciliation, to not have the opportunity to talk through and to heal a wound. Or in our communities, to just ignore something bad that has happened, something bad that someone has done. Just to focus on peacemaking at the expense of actual restitution and truth-telling and reconciliation, which requires confronting difficult conversations. And so it can feel like the nice Christian thing to do, the polite thing to do is to forgive and forget and move on. And I think we can forgive without forgetting, that actually it's important to remember things that have happened to us to prevent us from making the same mistakes over and over again.
And I would say that the real work of peacemaking is exactly what you're talking about. It's not glossing over things. It's facing them and naming them and then working through them, not running away. So it's hard work. It's hard work.
So I make a core distinction between civility and politeness. Politeness is technique. It is external stuff. It's what we do. It's what we say.
And it can be superficial.
Superficial, exactly. Yeah. Whereas civility is deeper. It's our outlook. It's a disposition of the heart that sees people again as they really are, as human beings first, worthy of respect, and that crucially sometimes actually being civil and respecting others requires being impolite, telling a hard truth, engaging in a robust debate. And the reality is, often today, not just in Christian communities, but in our culture more broadly, we settle for mere politeness. Too often we're content with just the superficial correctness of things without sufficient attention to why we're doing things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say that there are some times when we've become inured to the difficult things that we say without recognizing that there's another person on the other side, and we might leave it at the harshness without talking about the love part, So
that's
yes.
right.
I wonder about the role of us surrendering to the Spirit of God, who can do more than we can do just by clenching our fists and say, I'm going to do better. But let me first reset our conversation and we can talk about that. So if you're just joining us, you're listening to Inside Out on Family Life. I'm talking today with author and speaker Alexandra Hudson, founder of Civic Renaissance. Her recent Christianity Today article is titled, It's Time for a New Era of Christian Civility. So Alexandra, for people who've been nodding their heads when they hear you speak, people who see the need and want to help change the tone of debate and conversation, individual and public, what are the first steps you recommend they take, and where does a faith in Jesus Christ fit into that?
Part of my story is that I lived and worked in Washington, D.C. I was in federal government. I was at the United States Department of Education, or I guess the agency formerly known as the United States Department of Education. And that was an experience that was so disheartening. It galvanized me. And I left Washington, fled to the Midwest, and I came to appreciate the role of everyday actions, everyday conduct of common grace to sow seeds of joy and life and light in an era of darkness and despair. And I think we underappreciate the power that our everyday actions have to rebuild trust. That it's really easy to blame, it's easy to point fingers, and it's easy to want to tinker with policy or law or institutions. But I think that we each have way more power to be a part of the solution in our everyday, way more power than we realize.
So what would be some simple everyday things? I'm thinking about the ways in which we greet people or the ways in which we perhaps pay for the person behind us in a drive-through. But you must have some other ways that you're thinking about.
Absolutely. It starts with even something simple like knowing your neighbor and caring for your neighbor. Uh-huh. There are useful reasons to know your neighbors, but it's good for its own sake. Even if you can, being proactive about caring for them. If you can, welcome people into your home, into your life, onto your front porch. Part of my story is that when I fled Washington, I moved to the Midwest. One of our first friends here, she was a woman who came up to me after church one day, and she said, "Hi, I'm Joanna Taft. Would you like to porch with us sometime?"
To porch.
And I've never heard the word porch used as a verb before. Exactly. But I was curious. And so we went to our front porch that afternoon, and Joanna was staging a quiet revolution against our undivided status quo. She had curated people across race, gender, politics, geography, not to have a structured dialogue across difference, but just to be people in a shared space and to be human beings first in a world that wants us to assign value to these, often artificial identity markers and labels. It was so refreshing. It was an oasis from the division. And I realized there was something subversive to what she was doing. She was saying, I can't control what's happening in Washington. I can't even control what's happening down the street at City Hall, but I can control myself. And I'm choosing to make my community better and more beautiful.
One porch at a time.
Where I am.
Yes.
One porch, exactly. And Martha, I've been in 60 plus cities in 5 countries over the last year and a half since my book came out. Uh-huh. With my kids, with 2 and now 3 children in tow. Uh-huh. And I've seen people across the world who are doing this, from their front docks, from their stoops, from their living rooms with supper clubs, on their front lawns. Like, it's not even about the porch. The porch is just an expression of living a life with the disposition of civility, seeking out the outsider, transforming them into the insider and into the friend. And that is small, but it's radical. It is transformative.
And it's within our power. It's something we can do.
It absolutely is. And it is at 1,000% an act of faith, because we will never see this side of eternity the good that these small, thankless acts might do. But they have cumulative power And I'm trying to train my children. How do we proactively look for ways to brighten people's day? Not just teaching them that, but living that. I want my kids to see me, doing that, leaving people better off after encountering me than not. And I do that so imperfectly. I'll be the first one to share. It just feels so easy to go through life with a utilitarian mindset. Let's just get from point A to point B. Let's just get through the grocery store with our list in front of us and not really pay attention to the people around us. But we can sow seeds of light and joy.